Anyway, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Our last financial well-being Q&A series with none other than Armando Roman, our treasurer of our board of directors. So welcome, and I'm glad you all joined us this morning. I'll go through a couple little housekeeping rules. We go ahead and get started. Um, So just some minor things to go over. If your microphone is on, I ask that you please mute yourself, just out of respect for our speaker today and for everyone else who's attending our webinar. Also, that applies to any distracting video. You may keep that on. It's up to you. But we'll go ahead and be seeing the screen. We'll have a couple slides during today's presentation. Also, feel free to use the chat feature. We'll go ahead and be pulling questions from there. I'll be monitoring along with our staff any questions that may come in, as well as any sensitive questions. You can directly send me a message, or you could also directly send me an email. My email is right there. And then we'll also share the recording of today's presentation with you in a post-event email and survey. So if you haven't completed our surveys, we do have some special little raffle prizes if you complete those. We have some great prizes from Desert Botanical Garden that we really encourage you to fill out your surveys and for a chance to win that. And also make sure to include your contact information in the chat box, so that way we know who's all here attending. Nice little way to kind of network with everyone. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it off to Armando to wrap up start our presentation, not wrap up. So thank you so much, Armando.
Oh, thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, everybody, for joining this morning. So this is the fourth of several that we've done over the last several weeks. And the idea is to share some information with you that can be useful to you. So I'm going to talk for a little bit and show you a couple of slides that we use that people tell us they like and they find helpful. And questions that you might have, just ask them kind of whenever. Just go ahead and ask those questions. I want to make this useful for you, not really just kind of hear myself talking, but so that you get something that's going to help you from this time we're having this morning. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to start sharing my screen here. And I want to go through, I'm going to go through this slide. Let me get this going here. So you see a blue screen now, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I started out with this on the first of our series. I'm going to go through it again though, because as we go through life, we get hit with all kinds of things. And for many of us, including me, we're first generation in this space. My parents, when their families, they grew up working in the fields and they didn't know anything about college. They dropped out of high school. My two older brothers dropped out of high school. So when I finished high school, in my family, it was a big deal. To me, it wasn't a big deal because I was going to go on to college. I wanted to be a CPA. So I knew my track because I had decided what my track was going to be. But there was nobody at home I could ask any questions about, guidance or planning for education. I didn't know to apply to colleges. I didn't know there was money out there that would pay for it. I just didn't know. And a lot of us, I think, come from that same space. And if you don't know, then whose responsibility is it to learn? Well, it's yours. And you just have to learn by asking questions. And sometimes just by making mistakes, because that's sometimes the best way to learn. It's the most expensive way to learn sometimes, but it is a way that you will learn and remember and make changes going forward. So this slide is overall if I hit the right button here, let me see. Here we go. So this slide in the left-hand column is age. On the bottom, you're young, you're 25 years old. As you go up in years, you get to 100, and that's, you know, our life cycle. We don't know what's going to happen during life, but we have to do our best to try to prepare for it. So as we're younger, sometimes we think we'll win the lottery. And these are really in no particular order, but when you're thinking about your own financial planning in your own financial space, it's your responsibility to learn what you can and do what you can to take care of yourself and the family. So these are different things that come out during life that matter at different times. And I'm just going to kind of throw these up on the wall so you get an idea. You know, life insurance, estate planning. People think of estate planning often when they're older, or in my situation, I thought about that when my first child was born. You know, what happens if I die? Who's going to take care of my son? That's when I did my own estate documents a long time ago. Now my oldest is 24 years old. Life insurance, same thing. You don't think about life insurance till you then have a child sometimes. But you know, maybe you've got a parent who depends on you, and you don't have kids, but you've got a parent who depends on you. Then life insurance can be very, very relevant in your family. It just depends on your family situation. So different things that matter at different times. You know, how much do you want to save for retirement? I've got a slide I'm going to go through to just walk you through what a little bit each week can do for you over time in terms of retirement savings. Health insurance, I heard something this week about, or maybe it was last week, about possibly a new health insurance coming from the federal government. And we'll see. It's such an expensive thing to have, even if you're healthy. My healthy family of 5, it's about $23,000 a year. And there are no health issues in my family, but it's just really expensive and probably not going to get better. So I hope the federal government does do something about that. So again, different things that matter during your life. You're going to hear these words as you're going through your own life cycle and your own career. And some of these might be totally irrelevant today. They don't matter, right? But when they do matter, then you need to make sure to understand where they are. I mean, what they are and what they mean to you. Cash reserve, I've talked about a couple of times on these sessions. And the whole point being that since we don't know what the future has, we've got to have some kind of a cash reserve just in case. Even if everything looks fantastic, maybe that job's not going to be there. Maybe that next client is going to not come on board, or client's going to go away, but you just don't know. So you want to have a cash reserve so that you know you've got something there just in case. College funding is a big thing. When I went to college, I didn't know how I was going to pay for it. So I went to a community college for 2 years because that was affordable. I could live at home, and the tuition at that time was super cheap. It was, I think it was a couple $100s every semester. Compared to today, it's just so cheap back then, but today is very, very different. Retirement income, what do you want to have for retirement income? And then when you start to accumulate some wealth and you've got something, you've got a house, maybe a 401k, maybe an IRA, you've got some other investments, then it becomes, well, how do I protect what I have? How do I make sure that what I've worked all my life to get, that it remains mine and nobody can take it from me? So that's a whole nother area that becomes important as we go through life. So I'm going to shift gears now, and I'm going to go to another slide, and let me see if, give me 1 second to change my screen here. So do you see a different slide now with colors? Thank you. Yeah, I'm asking because I've assumed that you could see it before, and then Elizabeth has gently reminded me, hey, can you let us see your screen? So Elizabeth, thank you for that. So what I'm going to go through on this, this slide is really simplistic, but that's why I like it. So let me explain what this is. The two columns, the two vertical columns on the left are the age. So let's say this is a couple. The husband, age for husband is 30 years old. The wife is 30 years old. And let's say right now they have nothing. They're brand new, they're just starting out. Maybe they've got some college debt, but they've really got nothing. And they're trying to plan for their future. I've used this tool that I developed. I've used this to help people understand how much needs to get put away to have a certain amount when they decide to retire. So I've got a couple, and the wife is an attorney, very bright. She's a lawyer. She went to law school, so she's very bright. Numbers, though, are not her thing. That's just not an area that, she can have a conversation, but that's really not her strength. And for many people, numbers are not their strength. So I was setting up for a meeting with her and her husband, and she walks into the conference room and she says, Armando, I love this slide. And I said, oh, why? She says, because I get it. I understand. I know that if I put away so much money every month, every year, I know how much I'm going to have in 10 or 20 or 30 years. I get this slide. I understand it. So that's why I'm going through this with you, because we're not all numbers people, right? Sometimes we need things in a way that we can absorb and we can take action steps to make our situation better. So let me explain what this is. The green, you can see the green on the left-hand side here. The green is if your money earns 4%, that's what your numbers look like. The blue in the middle, if your money earns 6%, that's what your numbers look like. And this orange color on the right, if your money earns 8%, that's what your numbers look like. So I'll use this kind of to set up goalposts, telling a client if we end up somewhere between 4 and 8%, then we know we're going to be in a range where we're going to be okay. There's going to be enough there to support the lifestyle that they want. So again, this is a 31-year-old or 30-year-old couple, husband and wife, and right now they have nothing. So they want to start putting some money away. Well, let's say that starting out, they just can't do a whole lot because they're just starting out. But maybe they can put away $200 a month. So I just added that $200 a month into the right-hand part of the slide. $200 a month is I got to make a little modification here, is $2,400 a year. So the yellow up here in the right-hand corner is how much money they're putting away a year. This on the right-hand side, upper right-hand corner as well, is how much a month. So $200 a month is really $50 a week, okay? So with this tool, you can get a pretty good idea how much you've got to put away to have a certain amount later. So let's say you only put away $200 a month, but you start at age 30. In 10 years, what does that look like? Well, in 10 years, you can see I've got this real highlighted down below. In 10 years, what's it look like? Well, if you've only earned 4%, it's about $29,000. If you earn 6%, $31,000. If you earn 8%, about $34,000. So, well, maybe $200 a month is too much money. I know people who go to Starbucks every morning on the way to work. Now, with people working from home, maybe that's not happening anymore, but I think they're still going out for their Starbucks anyway. I don't go to Starbucks often. I don't really like their coffee. But if you go there every morning and you think about how much you're spending, let's say that it's five, to keep it simple, let's say that it's $5 every day. Well, that would be 5 times 5 is $25 a week. So 25 times a week times 4 weeks, it's $100. If you took that same Starbucks money and put that into an account to invest it, that ends up being $1,200 a year, upper right-hand corner. And what does that look like in a year? Well, again, keeping it simple, in 1 year, well, that's about $1,200 that you saved, $1,200. Or maybe it's, my growth here isn't working too well. Gotta look at my numbers again. But anyhow, if we look at 10 years, what does it look like? Well, now it's about $14,000. This is just the daily Starbucks. So one thing I've mentioned in one of our previous sessions is that if you're trying to put some money away or trying to see where you're spending your money, get a book out. Just get any kind of a book, anything, where you can just daily jot down where you're spending your money. And do that for a week and just take a look at it. Do it for a couple of weeks and take a look at it. And you can see, where am I spending my money? Because little things like that Starbucks, you know, again, looking at 10 years down the road, oh, that's almost $15,000. just on Starbucks? Would you rather take that same money and maybe put it towards a car, or towards retirement, or towards college for the kids, or towards a vacation? So it's all about choices, and what choices that you're making, and how do you allocate what you have. So I hope that makes sense what I'm doing here. I'm gonna make these numbers a little more substantial. So let's say you put away $1,000 a month and you earn 4%. Well, in 10 years, what is that? In 10 years, you've got about $144,000. So 1,000 a month might be a lot. Well, maybe you can do 400 a month. You know, it just depends on what you're doing and what you're trying to get to. So I will often have couples come in to see me, and they want to put money away, and they want to save for either for college, or maybe to buy a new house, or to have enough to retire. But the paycheck they're receiving today, it's already consumed. You know, it's kind of going everywhere. They're not really sure where it's going. So we'll help them go through that checking account and credit card statements to see where is the money being spent. Can we maybe cut out that Starbucks, and maybe you make your coffee at home? Can you maybe cut down the cable bill and take off some of those premium channels, and the money that you save, put that away into something else? Are there other things that you can do, maybe with housing, or with how much you're spending on dinners out, or things like that, to be able to work towards a goal? And so the whole idea of this is to show that what's called compounding of interest. Compounding is really, really powerful. And compounding, when you really see it, you've got to look about 10 years down the road. And you want to see even more, look 20 years down the road, because that's when compounding has the biggest effects. I've got a client, a physician. He makes about $1 million a year. That's a lot of money by anybody's standards. And you would think he's got a beautiful home and nice cars and all this. He doesn't. And the reason he doesn't is he made a choice. He says, I don't want a house, so he rents an apartment, because he doesn't want the responsibility of fixing the leaking toilet, or the roof leaks, or the landscapers. So he's renting a very modest apartment, and instead he's putting all his money into an investment portfolio, because his goal is by the time he's age 50, he can retire. And then he'll have enough where he can travel the world. So it's really up to what you want. And it doesn't matter what your neighbors want or what they have. It matters what's important to you, what do you want, and how are you going to get there? What steps can you take to improve that situation so that you can get there, and get there sooner? So Elizabeth, it looks like it's about 10:20. I'm going to stop talking and see if there are questions that have come up.
Great, thank you, Armando. No questions just yet, but please feel free to use the chat feature, everyone. Or if you're brave enough, make sure to raise your hand and we can go ahead and unmute you, so that way you could ask directly any questions there.
I have a question.
All right.
Hi there, Armando. Thank you so much, not just for this seminar, but for all of the work that you do on our board and all of your contributions. You know, building wealth in Latino communities is absolutely critical. I often say we do a really good job of making money, a really good job of spending money, saving not so much, right? That's what the data tell us. So my question for you is, there are so many employers that will set up a 401k and contribute to your fund, right? They'll match,
Right.
in essence. And I think it's important for people to understand, and maybe you can help take us through, that that's sort of free money, right? If you're willing to put 3% and your employer is willing to put another 3%, if you don't do that, you're sort of walking away from additional money that you could be making. So could you kind of speak to that a little bit, and how people can really take advantage of that?
Yeah, Monica, thank you. And it's my pleasure to serve on the chamber. I've been in the chamber a long time, the chamber board a long time. But you know, you're doing great work there. And now that things are so challenging this year in 2020, the work that you're doing there is even more important. So thank you for all that. You've got a great team. You've kept that team together, and you're just, I'm very proud of what our chamber is doing for our community. So let me answer, or let me touch on what you just mentioned. That's absolutely correct. When an employer offers a 401k, they will often offer a match, and the match is free money. So what they'll say, something in effect is, they'll say, okay, Armando, for the first $50 that you put into your 401k, we're gonna match that dollar for dollar. You put in 50, we'll put in 50, and immediately you have $100 in your 401k. That's what the match does. And sometimes that match is a set formula where that's just how it is on day one. Sometimes the match is then at the end of the year by the employer, so you might not see it until the end. But that's a very good point, Monica, that it is free money, and that when you have that available to you, what I would say is, if you are hesitant about putting money into a 401k, put in at least enough to get the full match. And often the match is something like a dollar for dollar match up to maybe 6% of your W-2. So if your W-2 is $50,000 a year, 6% is $3,000. So if you put in $3,000, they will put in $3,000, and now you've got $6,000. So even if you don't earn any money on your $3,000, you've already doubled it because they matched it. And if you don't put that money out of your paycheck into the 401k, you don't get their $3,000. So it is free money that people walk away from, because I don't think that they really understand how that works. So thank you, Monica, for asking that question. It's a very good question that a lot of people just don't fully grasp.
Armando, where's the control in a 401k if the your employer is the one contributing to it?
The control in terms of how it's invested?
No, in terms of how is it your money if it's going into this 401k that your employer is putting money into, and you leave that employer, how do you then transfer that?
They often have what's called a vesting schedule. So when you were in a 401k, they will match your money. Not all employers do, but many do. They'll match your money, and they will have what's called a vesting schedule. And they'll say to you, Benjamin, you work here 5 years, and after 5 years, what we have put in for you, it's yours. But if you leave before 5 years, then we're gonna keep the money we put in for you. But you give us 5 years, you are then what's called fully vested, and every dollar that we put in for you, it sticks and it's yours. And if you leave us in year 6, you take it all with you to your next employer's 401k, or you take it all with you into your own personal IRA. So the vesting schedule is very important so that you know when, and the question you want to ask is, well, when does this money vest? Vest is V as in Victor, V-E-S-T, vest. It's a vesting schedule. Does that make sense? Okay, good. That's a good question. Thank you for asking that question.
Great. We have a question. How do I start a 401k for my business? So this is a two-part question. I'll let you answer that first.
Okay, so a 401k for your business, you can do it different ways. The biggest 401k provider in the country is Fidelity. I expected Fidelity would be the most inexpensive 401k, but I called them either 2 or 3 years ago. I think it was 3 years ago, because I wanted to find out, people will come to me and say, hey, I want a 401k for my company. How do I start it? And I'll tell them, well, we can start it for you, but you're going to pay more to us because we're going to put all these controls in place. We're going to make sure that you've got a really nice 401k, and all those bells and whistles cost money. But if you're a really small employer, maybe you've got 5 employees, maybe they're all family, you don't need that. So my thought was, let me go to Fidelity, call them up, and see what it takes to start a 401k with them. That way, when somebody comes to see me, I can refer them to Fidelity and let Fidelity give them the 401k for less money. I thought it was a good idea. That's why I did that. But I called Fidelity, and what they told me is yes, they do startup 401ks for, brand new plans for a company. Yes, they do that. But minimum revenue that Fidelity needs, meaning the minimum that you must pay them every year to have your 401k with them, is $16,000, which is incredibly expensive. It's just not even realistic. So really, Fidelity does not want brand new 401ks. That's why they put the price so high, to keep people out. So you can look online at Vanguard. They have 401ks. We offer 401ks as well. I'm happy to talk with you about that and give you some more information, after this call, or if you want to schedule an appointment with me. But the second biggest provider of 401ks in the country is Empower. Empower used to be called the Great West, but they changed their name maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago, and now they are called Empower. They're the second biggest 401k in the country. We've got a lot of clients who we have put in 401ks with Empower. I speak very highly of them because my experience working with them has been fantastic. So that's another place to look at. So again, happy to talk with you after this meeting about that if you'd like. You said that was a two-part question, Elizabeth?
Yes, so the second part is so what is the difference between a 401k and a Roth? And can I start a Roth program for my business?
Yes. So the difference, a 401k is money that goes into a 401k has not been taxed yet. And it's important to think about this now before you set up a 401k, because you can set up a 401k that has a Roth component inside the 401k. So what it allows employees to do is it allows employees to put some of their paycheck into the normal 401k and not pay tax on that money. And it also allows them to put money from their paycheck into the Roth part of the 401k that has already been taxed. And the big difference that when you'll notice it is when you go to retire. Because I've got many people who will come to see me who have a lot of money in a 401k. Let's say they have $1 million in a 401k, and they're thinking that $1 million is all theirs, and now they're going to retire with this $1 million. But the truth is, the $1 million is the gross amount. It hasn't been taxed yet. So every dollar that gets pulled out, it's like you got a W-2 for that amount. So if you pull out $1,000, now you've got to report to the IRS you had $1,000 of income, and IRS is going to get its percentage. So it might take 20% of that $1,000. They might take 30% of that $1,000. That's why a Roth is so important today, because whatever you put into a Roth today, when you retire in 10, 20, 30 years, when you retire, if you have $1 million in the Roth, the whole $1 million is yours. It does not belong to IRS. You've already paid taxes. The whole $1 million is yours. So I hope that makes sense.
Great. Another question from Angie. What advice would you give college students who are just starting out and are employed or about to be employed?
I would tell them, for the ones who are about to go to work right now, I'd tell them to look at the benefits package of the employer and see what that benefits package is. Some will have a 401k, some will not. Some will have health insurance, some will not. Some will pay for your graduate school if you continue with college, some will not. So look at the benefits package being offered to make that, in your mind, think of a couple of things. I'm getting a paycheck and I'm getting this benefits package. And those two combined are my total income, my total compensation by working for that employer. And then think about yourself, what do you want to do? Do you want to go back to grad school? Well, if they're going to pay for part of the tuition, well, maybe this employer that has a tuition reimbursement, maybe that's a good choice. If this employer has a good training program, maybe that's a good choice. Or maybe, you're a single mom and you need to be available for your kids. So you need a flexible work schedule. Maybe the employer that has a flexible work schedule, maybe that one is better for you. And the benefits, they're not as important because you need that flexible schedule to take care of that little one. So it's looking at your own situation and looking at the different employers, what they offer, to make a choice that's best for you and your family.
Thank you, Roman.
Yep, thanks for the question, Angie. Other questions or thoughts?
Yeah, we have another question. So I think you had mentioned that you usually work with attorneys, but can you kind of give us an idea of how you coordinate as a CPA with an attorney?
Yeah, the coordination that matters, and I see this over and over again, it's really frustrating for me, but I see it happen a lot. I will see, and I often see it for a business owner because they have more complexity with their life. So I'll see a business owner who has a really good CPA doing the business tax, the business accounting, the business taxes, and doing the personal tax return as well. And then I'll see them have a business lawyer, and then they'll have a separate estate lawyer. And the people, I've got a physician who comes to mind immediately because he did this, and he was paying top dollar to all these people. He was not hiring cheap people. These were good, skilled, qualified, professional people. But nobody was talking to each other. So when I started working with him, it was obvious to me that his company 401k plan was in violation of the federal law. He didn't know it. He had a very expensive ERISA attorney who had put that plan in place for him. He had very expensive CPAs. He had 2 of them. Had a very expensive law firm doing his estate documents. And yet none of them knew that there was a federal violation going on here. But when I came in and looked at everything together, I saw it immediately. And so I went to the attorney and said, hey, did you know this is going on? He said, no. So without that coordination, we were able to get him in compliance and make it all good. But if that had gone on for several years, he potentially could have been sued by his employees because his plan wasn't right. And what I mean by not right is he had the formulas in the plan, and that meant that what he was putting in for his own contribution for himself, really, it wasn't all for him. It really had to go to him and all the employees. He thought it was all his money for his retirement. He didn't know any better. And his expensive professional advisors, the CPAs, the attorneys, and the ERISA attorney, none of them told him. So how was he supposed to know? He's not supposed to know. But that's an example of where that coordination is really important, because if you don't have the coordination, then there's very likely something that is going to be missed, and who pays the price is you. And you might not know it till 10 years down the road, but that's why that coordination is important. Did that make sense?
Yes, thank you. We have a
Okay.
couple more questions coming in. Thank you all for putting them in the chat. So Juan is asking, so with the Roth IRA, is there a certain company you would recommend to start one with, or how do you even start one?
So for a Roth, and you said IRA, not 401k, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So an IRA is a lot easier. An IRA is a lot less costly to set up. So a Roth IRA, you go to your bank, you can get online, go to Fidelity, go to Vanguard, Charles Schwab, TD Ameritrade. There are lots of them out there that will set up Roth IRAs for you. To set it up, it's probably going to cost you about $25 to maybe $35 just to set it up. But then to fund it, you've got to do a couple of different things possibly. If you are above the limits that you can put money into a Roth, then what you have to do is what's called a Roth conversion. And a Roth conversion is taking money that's in your IRA and rolling it into the Roth IRA. So you set up the Roth IRA first, and it has nothing in it on day one, but you've got money in this IRA. The Roth conversion is you say to IRS on your tax return, I'm going to take some of this IRA money, I'm going to put it into my Roth. I'm going to choose to pay taxes on that right now, today. And then everything that's left in this Roth will not be taxed ever again. So again, get online. Roth IRAs, very inexpensive to set up. There are income limits. So that's one thing you have to be aware of. And the other part that is a big thing also is every dollar that you convert to a Roth, let's say you did it today, you took $10,000 today from IRA to Roth IRA, that $10,000 is treated as additional income to you right now this year. So if your W-2 is 100,000 and you convert 10,000 of IRA, you're really going to pay taxes on $110,000 this year. That's how the Roth conversions work. It can get tricky, but I hope that concept is simple enough that it's understandable, because it's a really, really, really powerful tool. And if taxes are going to go up soon, which they are, then you need to think about those Roth conversions now.
Thank you. Another question we received here is the tax structure of a Roth the reason I don't see companies offering them?
No, it's not the tax structure, it's that Roths are newer. So in a 401ks, when they first started, there was no Roth available. In a 401k, you could not have a Roth part of it. You couldn't. Then later it was added. So because employers might have started their 401k 20 years ago, they just never added the Roth feature to it. So the employer would have to go back to the 401k company and say, hey, I want to add a Roth feature to my 401k. How do I do it? And then they would add it to the 401k. It's not that it's any more complex or any more costly. It's not the tax structure. It's just that a lot of people, employers, they don't really think about that. And if the vendor doesn't tell them about that, they won't know about it. And so they just don't know. But employees, you can go to your employer and ask them if they could add the Roth feature. It probably wouldn't even cost them anything to add it. And if it was a cost, it would be minimal. I mean, I would think maybe a couple $100.
Great, thank you. And then Mercedes is asking, can we get your email? And the answer is yes. You'll go ahead and receive Armando's contact information in our post-event email that we'll be sending out shortly. And then also we'll send you information. I know Armando briefly touched upon this, but he is providing attendees of these sessions a free 20-minute consultation. All that you need to do is just visit his website and book the appointment directly on there, which we will also share with everyone today.
Yep, I'm happy to help.
Awesome, thank you, Armando. A couple more questions that we've received. Should one purchase individual stocks in IRA or stick to mutual funds?
It depends on how much you have in that IRA. You said IRA, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. In my mind, IRA and 401k are so similar that I want to make sure I'm talking about the right one. So the IRA, it depends on what you have in the IRA. If you have, say under about $300,000, then you're going to most likely be limited to mutual funds. If you have your own IRA, say with Fidelity or Vanguard or Schwab, you could buy Apple stock, you could buy Netflix, Google, Facebook, all that kind of stuff if you like. But it comes down to risk. And we've seen in the last 6 months, companies like Apple, I was just looking yesterday, Apple in December was about $250 a share in December. Now it's $465 a share. It's almost doubled since December, Apple stock, which is incredible. So you could, in your IRA, you could invest in stock like that and do a little bit of I want to say gambling, but that's not the right word. You could do some of that with it, but the thing that is a risk is if a company like Apple suddenly goes under or suddenly something goes wrong, then everything you have on that stock could also go down to zero or close to zero. So that's the risk of putting a lot of money into any one particular stock. So if you've got $1 million and you want to have, you know, 300,000 in stock, well, that's different than if you only have 100,000 and you put all of it in stock, because it comes to risk. And then when you expect to cash that out and actually use that money, you know, to live on. So different ways to get to the same place, but mutual funds are going to give you what's called diversification. So you put $1,000 into a mutual fund, you own lots of stock, lots of different companies across different industries. So if any one company goes bankrupt, it doesn't really have an impact on the rest of your portfolio. And that's the real beauty of a mutual fund. That's why a mutual fund, that's why they were created, because it takes that $1,000 and it spreads it amongst lots of companies. But if you've got, you know, a big pot in there, say you have $1 million in that IRA, well, then you can probably afford to buy individual holdings. And there's a lot more to that, but I'm happy to talk with you about that in a 20-minute phone call if you like. But I hope that answered the question too.
Yes, thank you, Roman.
Okay.
Okay, one more question here. Just a reminder, we have about another 15 minutes or so. So if you haven't done so already, feel free to use the chat to input any questions. We are happy to help here. So next question, with the ability to pull from your 401k without any penalties this year, would it be a good idea to pull money now or move it over to a Roth IRA or IRA?
There are some additional choices with the CARES Act that was passed March 27th that opened up the door a little bit more to the 401ks. And that was to allow people to pull money out of the 401k if they needed that money, you know, just to buy groceries or pay the rent, that kind of thing. So that was the intent behind the law that passed on March 27th. So it did change that a little bit, and it gives you more flexibility. The rules, though, are still the rules that they were. They just give you more time to pay that loan back. And there probably are some lesser penalties involved as well. But what I would say to answer that question is, your 401k, the idea, the purpose, the intent of that 401k is to put money away for retirement. That's the purpose of that money. So I would keep that money focused on that purpose, because that's what it's intended for. If you need it, though, of course, you know, because you just need that income to live, you know, groceries or house payment, car payment, well, you got to do what you got to do, and you might have to just cash out part of that 401k. But if that's the situation, then yes, you just got to pull it out if there's no other choice. But if you're thinking that maybe because the rules are a little bit more lax, that you can pull out the money and roll it to a Roth or roll it to an IRA, those rules really haven't changed. So a Roth conversion, you are still going to pay tax on the money that you pull out and you roll to a Roth. You're still going to pay the same amount of tax. If you're under 59.5, then I think it was that 10% penalty that went away. I think, I'm not completely positive. I haven't looked at this in several months. I looked at it in March when it came out, but I really haven't looked at it much since then. So you're still going to pay the same tax on that. So your question was partly about Roth. Does it make sense to do a Roth with it? I would broaden it to the bigger picture. You know, is your income this year going to be the same as it was last year, or has your income dropped? If your income has dropped, that might be a good time to do the Roth conversion, because then your taxable income stays at about the same level and you'll pay about the same tax. So I hope that was not too confusing, but I think it probably was.
Great. Another question we received here. So when I dive into each prospectus for my 401k plan, I find the annual expense fees vary widely. Would it be worth sticking with the ones that cost the least amount of fees? Um, and then he also explains the past results are all very similar in percentage gains between them all.
The fees are important in mutual funds. You can find the expense ratios in mutual funds, and the expense ratios are only part of the cost. What you don't see that is in addition to that are the trading costs. Those just don't show up in the expense ratio. So when you look at mutual funds, whether it's in an IRA or a 401k, or you just put money in directly from your own checking account, the mutual funds all work the same way, and they all are going to have an expense ratio. Some of them might be 3%. They're pretty expensive. So unless you see the track record that they're getting you higher returns, then it wouldn't make sense to put money into that more expensive mutual fund, unless they're going to give you a better return. So all that information is public information. You can look it up and you can see what their returns are. So your question about sticking to the low-cost mutual funds, that's not always the best idea either. Just because it's cheap doesn't mean it's good. People sometimes get really stuck on cost, and they think that the lower cost they pay for the mutual fund, the better off they are. And that's not true, because it's just like anything else. You can get a really, really cheap car. And what are you going to have? A really cheap car. Is that what you want? Maybe you just want a car to get you back and forth. But the mutual funds have different earnings on them also. A good thing about them being public information is you can see their track records and what they've earned over time. It's all public information. So as you're looking at the expense ratio, look at how they've done, but you've got to look at that in the context of their peer group or other mutual funds that invest in the same types of assets as them. So there are several categories. I'll use one that's called large cap. If you are looking at an expensive mutual fund in the large cap space, then look at other mutual funds that are also in the large cap space. Look at those expense ratios and look at what they've earned over time. And then it's easier to make a reasonable judgment call on where it makes more sense to invest that money.
Great, thank you, Armando. We have about another 10 minutes or so. No other questions just yet, but can you give us just kind of a general overview or recap of, basic ways to save up or invest in your company or as an individual as well?
Yeah, and let me get my screen a little bit repositioned here, so I think I hit a wrong button. You can still see me, right?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, on my end I hit a wrong button and it did something weird, so I'm not sure what it did. But anyway, so you were asking about investing in general, is that what you were asking?
Yes.
Okay, so investing in general, that slide I started out with is very generic. And the whole idea is so that you can look at, if you put away, $5 a week or $50 a week or whatever it is, to see how that will add up over time. And I would say in terms of investing, there are very, very, very low cost index funds. And index funds are very plain vanilla. They're very plain vanilla. So if you're younger, let's say you're closer to 30 than you are to, say, age 50, but if you're 30 years old and you're just starting out to invest, you've got a lot of time ahead of you, and you have a lot of time for that money to work for you. So if you look at low-cost index funds, or what are called ETFs, exchange-traded funds, ETFs, if you look at those are going to cost you the least. But with those, you get access to invest in all kinds of stock in different categories. So if you're younger, those can make a lot of sense as an easy way, inexpensive way to get started. And you can get those through Schwab, TD Ameritrade, Vanguard, Fidelity. There are lots of companies out there that make it really, really easy for you to, from your kitchen table and your laptop or your phone, to set up an account and begin to transfer money from your bank over into that new account that you just set up. So I would start small. And the reason you want to start small is you want to kind of get used to it and begin to learn and understand. And that takes time. So maybe start, small, like $5 a week, small, and then get your confidence up a little bit more and maybe make it $20 a week, maybe make it later $100 a week, but begin to build up your confidence as you learn more about it. And it's constant education. Meaning you just got to spend time online, reading up on, well, what is a mutual fund? Well, why should I look at this Admiral Vanguard fund instead of that other fund? What is so special about that? Some people have time to do that and some people don't. And the ones who don't are the ones who will typically work with me because they don't have time for that. But if you have time, you can certainly learn a lot online. The information is free. And I would start with those very low cost ETFs or the index funds.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We have another question that came up. What about SEP accounts for business owners? What is the limit for 2020?
The limit is right around $56,000 to $58,000. That's a SEP IRA. And a SEP IRA, it's an acronym, SEP, but SEP IRA is a way for a small business owner to put money away into their retirement plan. And the SEP really is the retirement plan. So it's the easiest, least expensive way for a small company to start putting money away for themselves. Everybody can put money into an IRA. Sometimes it's deductible, sometimes it's not. But the limit on the IRA is about $6,000 a year. That's the most any one person can put in. And these are rough numbers, but it's about $6,000 a year. If you own a business and you start a SEP IRA, then that $6,000 limit that you had before as an individual, when you're the business owner, now that limit goes up to about $56,000 a year. So it takes a huge jump. So if you want to put in anywhere from say $6,000 to $56,000, then the SEP IRA is certainly one thing that you want to look at. And the other part of that is you can only put in about 20% of the profits of the business. So if your profit is $100,000, you can put in at most $20,000 in the SEP IRA. That's the upper cap on the SEP IRA. And these limits all go up a little bit every year. So it might be 57,000 this year, it might be 58,000, but it's somewhere in that mid-50s range, the maximum.
Awesome, thank you. Haven't received any other questions, but Armando, if you want to just kind of touch base and just go over, what that 20-minute free consultation with you kind of consists of, so that way everyone who's watching today takes advantage of that.
Yep, very good, thank you. Let me share my screen real quickly here. So do you see the toolkit?
I see your website page.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to move it so I can see it on my other screen over here. Oh, I think I just messed it up. Can you still see it?
I see red tail CRM.
Yeah, let me, give me 1 second here. Let me do this again, just 1 second. All right, do you see it now? My website?
Yes.
Sorry about that. I'm a little bit all thumbs this morning, it looks like. So on our website, this is the home page of my website. And it's easy to scroll to the bottom of this. On the left hand, there's this button that says Book Now. And on that Book Now, you'd click on that. You'd go, there's a discovery meeting here, this 20-minute discovery meeting. You'd click on that. You've got to choose the time zone. So you just, Arizona, right there, set time zone, and you pick a date and choose it. So in that 20 minutes, it's basically just a phone call where we're just talking. So the idea is that you can call in, tell me what's going on, what you're thinking about. We can have a conversation about that. I may be able to answer, a simple question in that 20-minute phone call. If not, we can go through, I mentioned before, we've got this roadmap process, and that takes an hour, but the 20-minute is a way to just kind of, answer questions that you might have. And then that might lead to another meeting, which has no cost either, but that one is the roadmap that I showed you earlier in a previous session. And the roadmap is going through a few things. It's your values, what's important to you, what are your goals, and where are you today? And that's what the roadmap helps to define. So we do that for free. And the reason we do that for free is that I found that when I go through this with a couple or with an individual, they get a lot of value out of it. And even if you just take that and do stuff yourself with Vanguard or Fidelity, great. But now you've got a tool that you can use to help you make better decisions for your family. And so we do these for free. The way to get that going is to go to our website, click on the discovery call, we'll have a conversation, and then we'll book that roadmap as a later appointment. So it's really a two-step process, but if it's just a quick, simple question, they can go here, Elizabeth, and book. We can have a phone call, and then hopefully if they have questions that I didn't answer in these 4 sessions that we've done, that I can answer it hopefully during that 20-minute phone call that we have.
Awesome. Well, we're almost nearing the hour. If we have any last-minute questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But on behalf of the chamber and our staff, we really thank you for helping us put on these financial Q&A webinars. This is the last one that we'll have, but we'll share all your information with everyone, including this recording after today's session. And stick around. We'll have a couple other webinars this week and for the next couple days to come, all very informational and very timely for you all. But with that, if there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up. And we thank you for attending today's webinar and hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.